After my family ignored my achievements, I threw a celebration they won't forget. So before dessert, I just want to say a few words. I hear myself say, and my voice sounds weirdly steady considering my heart is slamming against my ribs. I'm standing at the end of the long rented table, fingers curled around my glass so tight my knuckles are white. The little restaurant I booked is buzzing with low conversations and clinking cutlery. But at our table, it's suddenly quiet. My mom looks up from cutting my niece's food. My dad pauses with his fork halfway to his mouth. My brother Ethan leans back in his chair, eyes already flicking towards the bar like he's wondering how long this is going to take. The fairy lights I strung across the beams are throwing soft gold light on everyone's faces. And for a second, I can't believe I actually went through with this. I swallow, feel the fizz of the cheap Prosecco against my tongue. My notes are folded in my pocket, but I don't pull them out. I've been practicing this speech in my head for weeks. Thank you, all of you, for coming tonight, I say. My palms are slick, and I wipe one on my dress under the table where no one can see. It really means a lot that you're here to celebrate with me. I hear the faint edge on the word celebrate and wonder if anyone else does. My cousin Sam at the far end gives me a tiny encouraging nod. He knows. I told him just enough to get him here. My boss is a few chairs down too, talking quietly with my friend Nina, both of them completely unaware that my parents still couldn't tell you what my job actually is. It was a Sunday morning when the idea first took root, half out of spite, half out of self-preservation. I was sitting at my kitchen table, still in pajamas, laptop open, trying to decide if I was being insane or finally sane. The email announcing my promotion was still open on the screen, the company logo sitting there like a little banner of validation. "We're thrilled to appoint you as head of product," it said. I'd read that line so many times it was starting to blur. My phone buzzed beside me with a text from my mom. A blurry photo of Ethan's daughter in a tutu, captioned, "Can you believe how talented she is already?" I stared at the two screens, side by side, the formal, carefully worded recognition of the thing I'd been grinding towards for years, and the casual, offhand message about yet another milestone in my brother's life. My chest felt tight in a way I knew too well. It wasn't that my niece wasn't adorable. I loved her. I spent too much money on kids' books and tiny socks for her. It was that this was the third major thing that had happened to me in as many years that my family had managed to either forget or overshadow. New job? Ethan's engagement party was the priority that weekend. First big product launch? They couldn't come because my brother's dog had surgery. My master's graduation? They RSVP'd yes, and then texted me that morning to say they were so exhausted after helping Ethan move house. I grew up in a house where the walls practically had a groove worn into them from everyone orbiting around my brother. Ethan is the eldest by 5 years. In our parents' narratives, that gap was an ocean of extra responsibility and expectations on him. In reality, it meant he was always a few steps ahead, always hitting the big life moments slightly before I did. First day at school, first driving lesson, first job, first baby. Somewhere along the line, my parents started editing the story so that everything about him was monumental, and everything about me was nice or sensible or, "Oh, that's great, love," said while checking the time. When we were kids, it was little things. Ethan's soccer tournaments meant whole weekends away, everyone in matching t-shirts, Mum hoarse from cheering. The one time I made the final of a regional spelling bee, Mum forgot to put it in the family calendar and booked a hair appointment instead. Dad did drive me, to his credit, but the whole time he kept checking the time and muttering about traffic on the way back. When I came second, I remember standing on the stage with this huge ribbon on my chest, scanning the small crowd instinctively for their faces, and seeing just Dad, in the back, already edging towards the exit. "Proud of you, kiddo," he said in the car and then put the radio on. As we got older, the pattern just shifted up a scale. Ethan dropped out of uni after a year and kind of drifted for a while. Casual jobs, backpacking, finding himself. Every time he needed money or a place to land, there was a big family summit about how to support him. When I got a scholarship, there was a polite clap at dinner and then talk turned back to Ethan's plans for his next overseas trip. "You're the clever one, you'll be fine," Mum said, as if that made up for the fact that no one came to the awards night. I kept my head down, studied, got the grades, ended up in tech almost by accident, turning a summer internship into an entry-level role. I worked my way up from writing bland requirements documents and taking notes in meetings to actually designing stuff, making decisions, pushing back on senior people when I had to. I loved it in that exhausting, occasionally soul-crushing way you love a thing that demands a lot of you but gives a lot back. The first time I tried to share that with my family, it was after I'd led my first proper launch. We'd had this brutal week of late nights, fixing bugs, putting out fires. We shipped anyway. The numbers were good. My boss high-fived me in the corridor. That weekend, I drove out to my parents' place, armed with a bottle of wine and a slightly desperate need for someone who'd known me since birth to say, "Wow, look at you." At dinner, between Mum's roast potatoes and Dad's commentary on the football, I said, "So we launched this new platform at work. My team was in charge, and it actually went really well." The CEO mentioned me by name on the call. "That's nice," Mum said, spooning more peas onto Ethan's plate. "Ethan got approached by a recruiter last week, actually. They think he'd be perfect for a managerial role." Ethan shrugged like he didn't care, but I could see his chest puff a bit. I opened my mouth, then closed it. "That's great," I said, even though he hadn't had a full-time job longer than 18 months since he was 20. It was like that, over and over. Anytime I tried to share something I was proud of, the conversation either slid sideways into something about Ethan or got smoothed over with a vague compliment and then moved on. When I did my master's part-time while working full-time, almost broke myself with the workload, submitted my thesis with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and then got a distinction, I sent the official letter into the family group chat with a little "We did it" message. Mum wrote, "So proud of you?" With a heart. Ethan responded with a meme. Dad didn't reply. No one asked what it had been about. I told myself I was being oversensitive. That they were just busy. That this was what being the independent one meant. I didn't need the same level of fussing over. Except, I did. I didn't need banners and parades, but a consistent "we see you" from the people who'd watched me lug textbooks to my room for years would have been nice. The breaking point was stupid, in the way breaking points often are. It wasn't one of the huge things. It was an accumulation and then a final straw that snapped something inside me cleanly. We were all at my parents' house for Sunday lunch again. My promotion was in the works, but I hadn't heard officially. I was trying not to jinx it by talking about it. We were halfway through dessert, Mum's apple crumble, when my phone buzzed. I saw my boss's name on the screen and my stomach dropped. "Sorry," I said, stepping away from the table. "I should take this." I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, while my boss cheerfully told me the promotion had been approved, salary bump attached, official title finally matching the work I'd been doing for months. I leaned against the wall, hand pressed to my chest, smiling like an idiot. "Thank you," I kept saying. "Thanks so much." When I walked back into the dining room, it felt like I was carrying a small, glowing secret. "That was work," I started, unable to keep the grin off my face. "Before you say anything," Mum cut in, "we have some exciting news." She clapped her hands together, eyes shining. "Ethan and Jess are pregnant again." There was an explosion of reactions. Dad stood up to hug Ethan. My aunt squealed. My grandmother dabbed her eyes. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. I stood there, still half in the doorway, my sentence dying in my throat. Ethan beamed, arm around Jess, soaking up the attention. I sat down quietly. Ate the rest of my crumble, even though I could barely taste it. At some point, Mum turned to me and said, "What were you going to say, love?" "Nothing," I lied. "It can wait." It did wait. It waited for 3 weeks because they were busy with baby stuff, and every group chat was full of ultrasound photos and stroller debates. When I finally told them, squeezed into a gap between updates on Jess's morning sickness, Mum said, "That's amazing, darling." And then, "Make sure you don't overwork yourself. We need you healthy for baby cuddles." Driving home that night, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. The radio was on low, some song about chasing dreams, and I had this ridiculous urge to scream. Instead, I pulled into a petrol station, parked behind the building, and cried so hard my throat burned. Not because of the promotion, not because of the baby. Because I realized that I could win a Nobel Prize, and my family would still find a way to make it about whether Ethan needed help painting the nursery. The next morning, I woke up puffy-eyed and weirdly clear-headed. I made coffee. I sat at my table. I opened my calendar. The promotion became official that day. HR sent through the updated contract. My manager asked if I'd like to share the news at the next all-hands. People congratulated me in Slack with little party hat icons. I watched the messages roll in and thought, These people know more about what I do than my own parents. That's when the idea of the celebration started. At first, it was petty. I'll admit that. I fantasized about renting some fancy venue, making a big dramatic speech calling my family out in front of everyone. You never showed up for me, but look, these people did. Then I calmed down and realized I didn't want spectacle for revenge's sake. What I wanted was to mark this moment in my life properly, with or without them. I wanted to gather the people who did actually see me and say out loud, "This matters." So I booked the little restaurant near my flat, the one with the mismatched chairs and the owner who always remembers my order. They had a back room they used for small functions. I paid the deposit, chose a set menu, argued a bit about vegan options for Nina, and walked out with a date circled in my diary. On the invitations, yes, actual invitations, printed in everything because I am nothing if not thorough, I wrote, "Join me for a dinner to celebrate a big milestone." I sent them to my parents, my brother and Jess, my grandmother, a handful of cousins, my closest friends, my boss, 2 colleagues who'd been in the trenches with me on the project, and even my old high school English teacher who I'd kept in touch with. My mom called 5 minutes after she opened the envelope. "Lena, what's this?" "A celebration," I said, "for my promotion, and kind of just for surviving the last few years. I want to mark it properly. I'd really love you to be there." She hesitated. I could hear the cogs working. There was probably some calculation happening about babysitters, Ethan's schedule, whether this clashed with Jess's prenatal yoga. "We'll see what we can do," she said. "You know that thing where you pre-disappoint yourself because you don't want to be blindsided later?" I spent the next 3 weeks oscillating between hoping they'd come and rehearsing not being devastated if they didn't. The RSVPs trickled in. Friends said yes enthusiastically. My boss wrote back, "Wouldn't miss it." The family took their time. 2 days before the dinner, Mom finally texted, "We'll all be there. Dad and I, Ethan and Jess, Gran. Looking forward to it." There was a little smiley face at the end. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling this weird mix of relief and anxiety. So they were coming. I was actually going to have to say the things I'd been rehearsing in my head, not just in the shower. Which brings us back to the restaurant. The walls are painted deep green. There are candles and old wine bottles, and the table is cluttered with plates and half-empty glasses. My friends are scattered among my relatives, chatting politely. It smells like garlic and butter and something sweet from the kitchen. I've just clinked my fork gently against my glass. All eyes are on me. "Most of you know why we're here," I begin. "I got promoted recently, and I wanted to celebrate that." There's some polite applause. My boss lifts his glass. I smile, but I can feel the rest of the speech pressing against the back of my teeth. "But it's more than just a promotion," I continue. "It's a line in the sand, I guess. A moment where I wanted to stop and actually look at how far I've come." I see my mom's eyes mist a little. She thinks this is going to be a generic gratitude speech. I take a breath. "When I was a kid," I say, "I used to imagine what it would be like when I was a proper grown-up. I thought there'd be some big moment where everyone would put their hands on my shoulders and say, 'Look at you. We're so proud.'" There's a ripple of laughter from my friends. They recognize the sentiment. My family shifts, not quite sure where this is going. I don't think anyone gets that moment exactly the way they imagine. I add quickly, not wanting to sound accusing too soon. Life is messy. People are busy. But I realized recently that a lot of the milestones in my life have kind of slipped by without being properly acknowledged by the people I love the most. Mom frowns slightly. Dad's watching me more closely now. Ethan looks mildly uncomfortable. I don't mean this as an attack, I say, even though part of me really, really does. But I want to tell you a story. My story. And then I want to toast to where we are now. I talk. Not in a rush. Not screaming, just laying out the timeline like exhibits in a case. I talk about the spelling bee where I came second in the region and came home to an empty house because everyone was still at my brother's game. I mention how I kept the ribbon pinned behind my door for years, this secret little trophy to myself. I talk about the scholarship letter I opened alone at the kitchen table while Mom was out picking up Ethan from God knows where, and how I did a little silent dance and then made my own celebratory hot chocolate because there was no one to tell. I talk about my master's graduation, about them texting me that morning to say they were so exhausted, and could we do a special dinner another time that never actually happened. I don't embellish. I use the actual words they used. I see Mum's hand fly to her mouth when I say them. I talk about the product launch, the promotion phone call, muffled by the announcement of my brother's baby. I keep my tone gentle, but I don't pull the punches. I am genuinely happy for every good thing that's happened to Ethan, I say, looking directly at him so he knows I mean it. I adore my niece. I'm excited for the new baby. But it hurt over and over to feel like there was no room in the spotlight for me. Like if something good happened to me and something good happened to him at the same time, I was automatically the one who had to step to the side. There's a long silence. The restaurant noise seems suddenly louder around us, like we're in a little bubble of quiet. I didn't throw this dinner to shame anyone, I say, feeling my throat tighten. I threw it because I realized I've been waiting 32 years for a celebration that wasn't going to magically appear. I've downplayed my own achievements so much that even I started to believe they weren't a big deal. And I don't want to do that anymore. I gesture around the table to my friends and my colleagues and my bewildered family. So tonight is my celebration, not just of a new job title, but of every late night, every exam, every time I kept going when it would have been easier to shrink. I wanted to invite the people who have seen me and the people I wish had seen me more and say, this matters. I matter. My voice wobbles on that last bit. I let it. It's the truth. I raise my glass. To all the versions of me who kept their head down and kept going, I say quietly. To this version who finally booked the restaurant, there's a beat where no one moves. Then Nina stands up, tears in her eyes, and clinks her glass against mine. To Lena, she says firmly, who is a badass and one of the smartest people I know. My boss stands too. To Lena, he echoes, without whom our last project would still be on fire. My cousin Sam gets up, rolling his eyes in that affectionate way he has. To my cousin, he says, who let me crash on her couch for 2 months and didn't murder me and also is apparently crushing it at life. Who knew? One by one, my friends rise. The colleagues follow. The clinking spreads around the table like a wave. Eventually, even it feels like an hour but is probably 10 seconds. My dad pushes his chair back and stands too. A little unsteady, he clears his throat. To Lena, he says, voice rough, who has made us very proud even if we didn't always say it like we should have. Mum is crying openly now. She lifts her glass with a shaking hand. To my girl, she says, I'm sorry we didn't show up better. We should have. We will. Ethan looks at me. Something complicated in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Confusion. A bit of defensiveness. But he lifts his glass too. To my little sister, he says, who apparently has been doing a lot more than I realized. We drink. The Prosecco is cheap and a little too sweet, and it tastes like something shifting. After the toast, the room exhales. Conversations start up again, a little shakier than before. People come up to hug me, to squeeze my shoulder, to tell me they had no idea. My grandmother holds my hand and says in her thin, soft voice, I thought you were just getting on with it, love. We didn't know you needed the fuss. That's the thing, I say gently. Everybody needs some fuss sometimes. Later, when the plates have been cleared and the staff are politely hovering, hinting that they'd like to go home at some point, my mom asks if we can talk outside. I follow her onto the little terrace, where it's cooler and quieter. The streetlights throw pale circles on the pavement. She leans on the railing, mascara smudged, hair falling out of its clip. She looks tired in a way I've never noticed before, or maybe never allowed myself to notice. I feel like the worst mother in the world, she says without preamble. You're not, I say automatically. I mean it. You're just human. And humans miss things. She laughs shakily. We didn't just miss things, Lena. We steamrolled them. We made everything about your brother because he was always louder, needing more. She shakes her head. I think we convinced ourselves you didn't need that from us, that you were fine. And then we just kept acting like that even when you weren't a child anymore. I let you, I say. I didn't want to be a burden. I told myself that being independent meant never asking for anything. It's not all on you. She turns to look at me, eyes shiny. Thank you for inviting us tonight, she says. You could have celebrated with your friends and never said a word to us. You gave us a chance to see what we've been doing. I don't know how to fix it all at once, but I want to try. I nod. I don't fully trust that the dynamic of 3 decades can be rewritten with one dinner and some tears. But I believe she believes what she's saying. That's a start. When I get home that night, the fairy lights of the restaurant still a soft echo in my mind. I kick off my shoes and sink onto my couch. My phone buzzes with messages. Photos from the evening, friends saying thank you for inviting them. My boss texting, proud to work with you. There's a message from Ethan too. Surprisingly. Just one line. Didn't realize I was taking up so much space. Will do better. There's a second one that comes through while I'm reading the first. And hey, head of product is a big deal. Well done, Len. I don't cry for once. I smile, tired and a little raw, and text back, thanks. Talk later. The celebration didn't magically rewrite our family story. There are still group chats where baby photos get more comments than anything I share. There are still moments where my parents slip into old habits, and I have to gently say, remember when we talked about this? There are still days when I catch myself downplaying my achievements before anyone else gets a chance. But now there is also this. A night where I stood up in a room full of the people who matter to me and said clearly, I am proud of myself. A night my family will remember not because I shamed them, but because I finally invited them to see me properly. And they accepted, even if awkwardly. After my family ignored my achievements, I threw a celebration they won't forget. Not because it was the fanciest party or the biggest news, but because it was the first time I stopped waiting for them to hand me my moment and took it for myself. And it turns out, once you do that once, it gets a little easier to do it again in 100 small ways, every day.